This episode is brought to you by Workday. Workday is the next-gen ERP powered by AI that actually knows your business. It helps you handle the have-to-dos so you can focus on the can't-wait-to-dos. It's a new Workday.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and him, Kieran Maguire from Liverpool University. Good morning, Kieran. It is morning. It's quite early morning, but we're here for a reason. I wish we weren't, but we're here to do a special podcast on the latest at Sheffield Wednesday, a story that we've been following for more than 2 years now. And a story that had a significant development yesterday with the breakdown of the preferred bid. So significant that we thought it was best to do a special pod so we could talk about it in detail rather than wait for next week's news pod and just devote 5 minutes to it. We did actually record this last night. Such was the urgency we thought. We recorded this last night, but there were sound issues, which turned out, I believe, to be your pyjamas in the tumble dryer.
Yes.
And if there are Sheffield Wednesday fans listening to this for the first time, you think, well, they sound a bit unprofessional. Don't worry, you're in the right place for all the insight you could want from the country's leading professional football finance expert. You've been worried, Kieran, for the last 4 weeks. You said the mood music and the length of time it was taking was concerning you. I was cautiously optimistic, which I think, with hindsight, was just hope for Sheffield Wednesday fans. But I want to start, Kieran, by reading the statement issued by James Board, who was the preferred bidder, on behalf of himself and his two colleagues late yesterday evening, when he said, to explain them pulling out, and it is them pulling out. We should make this quite plain. The reason is they have pulled out. The historic mishandling of the club and the pattern of catastrophic underinvestment means our sizable binding bid can no longer be justified. We've spent over £4 million to help run the club, and after much consideration have decided we can no longer afford to do so. And then there's wholehearted apologies and best wishes for the rest of the season and next year. I'd be interested in your interpretation of that statement, Kieran. In particular, the words "can no longer be justified," I think, stand out.
I find the statement baffling. They were aware of the historic mismanagement of Sheffield Wednesday under John Chansiri. Everybody was. So that cannot be a reason for them to change their viewpoint as to the validity of the investment between December and February. It comes across as if they were in receipt of the funds to be able to buy the club, and this is my cause for concern. Certainly, the vibes I was picking up was that the ability of the consortium to pass the owners and directors test was hitting a few bumps on the road. Now, they are overseas bidders. James Board himself, his background is in crypto and gambling and so on. So to be able to find and justify the source of funds is always going to be that much more difficult when you are operating in that part of the economy. And there's nothing wrong with that part of the economy. I cannot stress that enough. It doesn't necessarily have as many receipts as some of the others. The accusation that it couldn't justify the price, well, then why put in a bid? And again, the bid was 47 million pounds. When I read that, I thought it was a typo. 47.8 million pounds. We did a live show in Rotherham in April 2025. And we were asked what we thought the price was. And I said at the time, perhaps between 40 to 45 million. As a championship club, it had a decent squad. So think about the main assets of a football club. It's the three things. It's the real estate. It's the property, which is in disrepair. That's not changed since December. It's the playing staff. Those have significantly deteriorated since last April, and it's the share in the EFL itself as a championship football club. What the board group were buying was a squad which consists of, and this is no disrespect to those players, they are still professional footballers, a squad who, according to the administrator, were on League Two wages, and that's a reflection of their standing within the business. The stadium was just as bad a mess as before, and now it was a share in League One as opposed to a share in the Championship, all of which is going to drive things from a negative perspective. So it just made no logical sense. And the board group have put in £4 million. Yeah, I think they put in £2.5 million as an upfront fee, and they've been putting in around about £400,000 a month to effectively to keep the lights on and pay the wages.
There are several things I will come back to there, Kieran, in that answer. In particular, the size of the bid and the owners and directors test. But firstly, when we spoke last night, from what I could hear over the sound of your pyjamas going around the tumble dryer, you mentioned that this is a kind of classic divert statement from owners who may not have been serious in the first place. But they have spent over £4 million, Kieran. So that would indicate to me they weren't just tyre kickers. They weren't just after the glamour of being associated with an English football team. On the other hand, as the BBC and many other people are reporting, they had apparently been asked to put in another £1 million this week. And they were due to make another £1 million payment this week. And this would indicate that they haven't got that £1 million. And therefore, if they haven't got that, they weren't serious contenders in the first place. So I'm conflicted here. I'm sure Sheffield Wednesday fans are now conflicted as to whether these people ever did want to buy the club.
Well, they wouldn't have put to lose £4 million over a period of 2 months does indicate that they must have been serious bidders, and they presumably must have been able to demonstrate to Begbie's that they had the criteria. You had to prove that you had £50 million, and you had to prove where that £50 million came from. Well, they clearly were able to demonstrate that they got £50 million. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been let into the data room. They wouldn't have become the preferred bidder. As far as the payment this week is concerned, is it can't pay or is it won't pay? Is it because they were picking up the vibes that this was going to be a tougher nut to crack than they'd initially anticipated from an owners and directors test? We don't know. We'll have to see if there is anything coming out of other sources which might be able to confirm or deny that. I do wonder whether or not they were effectively writing checks that they couldn't cash, in the sense it is a consortium, and the nature of a consortium is that you go round and you say, well, you're good for 6 million, you're good for 12 million, you're good for this and that. And then, upon further investigation, somebody said, I said 6 million, but actually I meant 2. You know what it's like when you're on a night out with the lads and somebody's always about to go and buy around and doesn't. Is it that type of situation? And could it perhaps have been the case that they themselves didn't have the 50 million, but they were acting as a front for other parties who were providing the actual funding, and those other parties have gone back and they've taken a look at the numbers and they said, with this £47.8 million, it's a nonsensical figure in any way, shape or form, given that you're inheriting a stadium that needs so much work. And that's the bit I can't understand. They're saying, oh, we weren't aware of the problems. Well, where have you been living for the last 3 or 4 years? Sheffield Wednesday has been a car crash waiting to happen under Chancery.
Just briefly, before we go into more detail on the size of the bid and the owners and directors test, as I said, the failure to pay the £1 million, we believe it was, instalment this week, or the unwillingness or inability to pay that, will that have an impact on Sheffield Wednesday's finances going through to the rest of the season? Does it leave them in any sort of financial jeopardy in the short term?
No, I mean the press release that we've seen from Chris Wigfield in particular, who is sort of fronting this particular administration, that there are nominally 3 administrators, but that's the reason why you do that in practice is that if Chris is out of the office and something needs signing, you can go to one of the other partners to sign it off. So Chris Wigfield is the person that's operating on this one on a day-to-day basis. He said that the cutbacks that have been undertaken at the club, best players of likes of Barry Bannon and so on have been let go, and they've raised some money from sales. They do have enough money to get to the end of the season. I think that's really important because that allows them to fulfil their fixtures. If they weren't able to do that, if they couldn't complete the fixtures, big repercussions from an EFL point of view. So that's the one comfort blanket. But what it does do is it's hinting that we've now got a new deadline of May. And I'm assuming that the May wage bill can be covered on the basis of the monies which have been generated to date. Could we move that on a few months? Well, if Begbie's feel that it's going to be a long-term exercise, then in theory they could start to sell season tickets for 26-27 and use that as a means of generating cash and so on.
3 big questions, Kieran. The size of the bid, owners and directors test, possible new owners. Let's take them in order, if you don't mind. The size of the bid, as you said, £47.8 million, much higher than you thought, but also much higher, it seems, than any of the other bidders. And I'll quote the BBC website here. That board bid is significantly higher, and this is why it's significantly higher. No other bid matched the 25p in the pound requirement for creditors, which means that any new owner coming in will possibly leave those creditors unpaid, the full amount, which possibly means a 15-point deduction at the start of next season. Why was their bid so high? Was it because they wanted to avoid that 15-point deduction, or was it because they wanted to blow the other bidders out of the water?
I think it was probably the former. If I was on the buy side of the deal, what I would do is do a broad assessment. If the aim was to get Sheffield Wednesday promoted in season 26-27, then I'd have gone ahead with a bid which couldn't be justified under any formal valuation fundamentals. You'd crunch the numbers in your spreadsheet and it would come out far lower. But we say, right, but we need to go to 47.8 because that will get us through the 15-point threshold. It would appear that the other bidders have probably taken a more pragmatic approach, and I'm not in favour of this on many regards. Many local suppliers have provided goods and services to Daejeon Chancery's Sheffield Wednesday Football Club in good faith, probably have turned a blind eye to when payments have been late because many of them will be Wednesday fans themselves, and therefore they say, well, it's the club I love. I know they're going through a tricky patch. I think we'll get through it. And therefore they are the ones who are significantly suffering here. But if I was being on the cynical, the hard-nosed business side, I would probably assess Sheffield Wednesday's position as being so severe that the chances of being promoted in 26-27 are probably quite remote. So therefore, why not just take the 15-point hit, save myself £20 million perhaps, and use that £20 million to work on the infrastructure, to look forward to building a squad for season 27-28, and to try to put the fundamentals in place at the club, which are necessary to make it more stable, to make it more sustainable, and for when Sheffield Wednesday returns to the Championship, to be competitive in terms of where the club ultimately wants to be, which is, of course, in the Premier League.
That pragmatic approach, the cynical one, you say, is a hard sell for fans, though, isn't it? It's one that says that we're taking over the club. We're going to be starting next season with a 15-point deduction, but don't worry, we'll get through, and then the season after that, we'll see where we are. That's I mean, I understand that from a business point of view, but from an emotional fan's point of view, just again briefly, I'll keep getting distracted because everything you say brings us something else up. Just for the benefit of Sheffield Wednesday fans who may be listening to us for the first time, when it comes to accepting the bid, the administrator's job is to pay off the creditors. It's the administrators really have no interest at all in the future of the football club, do they? They're kind of legally obliged to accept the highest bid as long as it's kosher.
Absolutely. The aim of the administrators is to sell the business as a going concern from a pragmatic point of view. Sheffield Wednesday as a football club is worth far more as a collective. The fact that you've got the future cash flows from the fans, the fact that you've got that participation in the EFL, it's worth far more as that type of business than being liquidated. So that there is a practical perspective as far as the administrators are concerned. Yes, but they do have a legal and professional obligation towards those creditors who have supplied Dejan Chansiri in good faith to try to extract the maximum possible. So you might not like the matching tie and handkerchief of a particular bidder, but you set that aside from a professional perspective. Ultimately, it's money that counts, and it's the money which can be used. Because remember, these creditors, they're already 6 months down the line not being paid, and it will take a considerable amount of time to work its way through. So for people not familiar with the football insolvency rules that operate within the industry, you have to pay back what we refer to as the secured creditors, the lenders, in full. You have to pay your football creditors in full. That could be any outstanding transfer fees. There's not much there because Chansiri hadn't invested in the squad. But there could be outstanding monies, bonuses due to players and so on, which haven't been paid, which could be overdue. So 100% of that. In theory, you have to also pay 100% of what's owed to HMRC. But if we use the Derby County scenario as an example, the administrators managed to negotiate that down. And if you then want to avoid a 15-point penalty, everybody else has to get 25 pence in the pound. And that other parties include Dejan Chansiri himself. Now, there are two companies involved here. There's Sheffield 3 Limited, which is the stadium company. And I think he's owed around about £60 million there. So that's 25% of that's 15 million quid. We're still awaiting the administrator's report on Sheffield Wednesday Football Club. In theory, that should be out any day. And we'll see if Chansiri is separately owed money there. And it sticks in the craw that he's going to be getting a quarter of what was owed to him because he is the person most directly responsible for where we are today. If you contrast his position to that of Mel Morris at Derby County, of whom much criticism can be directed, I'm not denying that, but at least Morris did the very decent thing. He was in for somewhere in the region of 150 to 200 million pounds from the football club. And in order to facilitate the sale, one of the good things he did, he said, right, I'm going to put in a claim and my claim is zero. So I'm going to get 25% of zero, which is zero. And that made Quantumar, who were the administrators of Derby County, it made their job that much easier.
That sounds very much like you're implying that Chansiri won't do that Chansiri will want his 25%.
Well, we wait to see the administrator's report, but certainly the vibes that we're getting and would indicate that Chansiri is putting in his claim. If you take a look at the Sheffield 3 interim administrator's report, there does appear to be evidence of a claim there as well.
You've been mixing too much with the students who are using words like vibes. Look at you, the vibes we're getting.
This is your fix.
I am your host, Stassi Schroeder. Welcome to Tell Me Lies, the official podcast. What's the most unhinged thing of season 3?
Steven, because he's so evil.
I do think he is misunderstood.
You see everyone face consequences.
It's intoxicating. The writers just know how to trick you.
There's always a twist in this show.
Tell Me Lies, the official podcast, January 6th, and stream the new season of Tell Me Lies, January 13th on Hulu and Hulu on Disney+.
Talking of kosher bids, Kieran, I'm obliged to BBC Sport again here, who quote an insider, they say here, who say that the James Board bid, the financial and background checks had been particularly challenging, with significant amounts of documentation still outstanding. Do you know why this check had been particularly challenging, and what sort of documentation would still be outstanding?
Well, if we go back to what we were saying about James Board, his background is in professional gambling, AI, tech, fintech, startup companies. That they tend to be fairly new, so therefore, trying to work out their value is difficult. Another one of the consortium, Faisal bin Jamil, he was the chief executive of the bid. Again, he's based overseas. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But again, getting paperwork to allow individuals to pass the owners and directors test becomes slightly more complicated. And the more people you've got involved, the more complicated it gets. If we look at what happened with Tranmere Rovers, they were subject to a bid from a consortium of businessmen. And then one or two of those businessmen said, actually, and this was an American, but actually, there's a few things taking place in the United States at present, which are more important to us. And sorry guys, we're going to drop out. So I think that has caused complications, not insurmountable complications. I'm a great believer in where there's a will, there's a way, but the EFL very much had their fingers burnt, going back to what happened at Derby County. There, the preferred bidder was a guy called Chris Kirchner. He came from some sort of online logistics company, which appeared to have a very glossy website, but not much else. And Mr. Kirchner is currently residing in a cell as a result of fraudulent behaviour, and he was investigated by the FBI. The EFL, I think, had approved him, and there were quite a few of us who were sceptical. And here, you've got to give huge amounts of credit to those journalists who went that much further. The likes of Matt Slater at the Athletic, who from day one was saying the big words quietly in relation to Kirchner, and nobody was eventually that surprised. So the EFL doesn't want to go down that route again and be made to look foolish. And as a consequence of that, they are being very, very cautious and taking their time over the approval process. If progress was being made, then there's no reason why this consortium, the board consortium, couldn't have found that £1 million this week and said, right, well, we'd hoped to be in by the start of March, but now it's going to be the 1st of April, the start of April, and we move on.
When you say this guy was chief executive of the bid, just briefly, does that mean they set a company up, the three of them, to take over Sheffield Wednesday?
I'm not certain. I think there was something in place, but I think you don't actually have to be a formal company.
Oh, you don't? Okay,
I'll do some. You can set that up 24 hours before the final cash is transferred if necessary. But many people do set up investment vehicles in the form of companies and effectively just keep them dormant until as and when they are needed.
Now, the administrator's statement yesterday, Kieran, after the deal collapsed, does contain a glimmer of hope for Sheffield Wednesday fans, in that it very specifically says this doesn't mean we're going back to square one. It doesn't mean we start right from the very beginning and go through this whole lengthy process. It means that, and they said that already within an hour, two of the other bidders have stepped forward to say we are still interested, although from what you tell us, that's going to be at a much lower bid. I'd be interested to A, to hear what you think about the administrator's statement, but B, I'd like to go through the three major suspects, if you don't mind, that are being bandied about. The first one is John Textor, who's been linked for quite some time now. I would imagine, as a Palace fan who's been following his activities, he would struggle to pass the owners and directors test, Kieran, especially since it was only on Monday this week that he issued an extraordinary, not me gov, nothing to see here statement about how the financial problems at the Eagle Holdings Group were everybody else's fault. The second one is Simon Jordan, your old mucker, who apparently is part of a consortium who are interested in making a bid. People may be thinking that because he's been very vocal in the last couple of weeks that Sheffield Wednesday should get no more points deductions. It would be really unfair for the EFL to put anything else in their way. So people may be putting two and two together and making 5 there. And of course, the final one is possibly the most likely, and that's Mike Ashley. So I wonder what you think about, first of all, what the administrators say about the fact it's not going to be a necessarily much longer time frame, and those three individual bidders.
Yeah, I think the administrators have been through the process in the early weeks of the administration of filtering out the tire kickers, the fantasists, the delusionists, the people who wanted some publicity from just being associated with the football club. So that process has been dealt with, and I think that's good news. John Textor, I think, completely lacks credibility at present. He's entertaining anybody, but I wouldn't want Krusty the Clown owning my football club, and equally, I'd probably still prefer him to John Textor because his record is spotty, and I think he has other things which he should be focusing on in terms of his portfolio of clubs at present. Simon Jordan, he has publicly stated in the past that he was interested in a Sheffield Wednesday bid, but he objects in principle to Dejan Chansiri getting a penny. And I imagine that chimes with an awful lot of Sheffield Wednesday fans and football fans in general. And here I think you've got to call into question the EFL rulebook, because in my view, if I was writing it as an independent person, I would say you have to give 25% to unsecured creditors, excluding owners and directors themselves,
Right.
in order to give precedence to those people who have put money into the club in good faith. That is not the case, and the reason for that is not the case is because the EFL rulebook is not written independently. It is approved by club owners, and turkeys don't vote for Christmas. So I understand why the rules are the way that they are, and I suspect that if Simon Jordan was an existing owner of a football club, he also would probably say, my views might be slightly different. So there's that. Mike Ashley, he got his fingers burnt at Derby. He tried to bid, but he wasn't able to do so there because Mel Morris didn't put the stadium company into administration, and therefore he was able to act as kingmaker and effectively blackball Mike Ashley in the sense that he could then quote a high price. Now, the good news at Sheffield Wednesday is that both the stadium company and the football club are both in administration and are being sold as a package by Begbie's. And then there's somebody else. There's the Storch family, the Chicago-based Storch family, and a guy called John McAvoy. And I think I've got no involvement with any of these. I think they could potentially be A, credible bidders, and B, bidders who are more likely to release funds in terms of accelerating growth at the club. But they've given a statement to BBC Sheffield, and they've said, well, their interest still remains, and they will await and presumably in contact with Begbie's, and when we go from there.
From what you've said then, Kieran, in terms of the timescale for the takeover, which means how long it takes the owners and directors test, from a Sheffield Wednesday point of view, a single bidder like Mike Ashley would be much better than a consortium, because then you're only checking one person. And you would imagine if Mike Ashley were to bid, the owners and directors test there would be pretty much a nod through, whereas Simon Jordan's bid may have 16 other people in it. We know Simon Jordan's had his problems in the past when he was owner of Palace, for example. So that would of necessity take much longer. So are you saying that you think a single bid would be better?
I think a single bid would be quicker.
Right. Okay.
And then you've got that constant standoff in life. Do you want to do the right thing, or do you want to do the quick thing? And sometimes that Venn diagram has an overlap, and that works out very well, and sometimes it doesn't. Given what Sheffield Wednesday fans have been through, that they are fairly phlegmatic. I think that they want to focus on the longer term picture. We've seen what's happened at other clubs. There's a misconception in life that change is the same as improvement. Mm-hmm. If we take a look at what happened at Wigan with some of their takeovers, that wasn't the case. Bury, another example. Morecambe, increasingly looking like it was a frying pan to fire situation. So getting somebody who can, first of all, understand the values and the history and the heritage and the culture of the clubs and its fan base, I think is absolutely essential. And secondly, has the resources and is willing to spend those resources will be beneficial. Derby got it right eventually. The current owner, David Clowes, I don't know anybody that's got a bad word to say about him. And I know that he's gone beyond what he had to do in terms of certain activities, which I can't go into. But you go, what a decent bloke he is. So you would hope that whoever takes over would have similar values. And again, it helps the fact that he's a local lad and a Derby fan as well.
The world moves fast. Your workday? Even faster. Pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data. Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use. Helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize. So you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/M365 Copilot.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
It's now 9 o'clock, Kieran. I'm very aware that you have a room full of eager students ready for Sir to come in and fill their little heads with knowledge of football finance. But I just want to ask you 4 very quick practical questions and then an emotional question. The first practical question is that you told me last week that a statement by the administrators was due anyway. This timescale. Now, obviously, we had an emergency statement yesterday, but would we still be expecting another full statement of the current state of play from the administrators, Begbie's, very shortly?
Yes, they have a statutory responsibility to update everybody involved with the administration as to the progress which has been made to date. And that is determined by legislation. So this is a document which will be lodged at Companies House as opposed to a press release. So what we had from Begbie's was a press release following the collapse of the bid.
That's an important distinction. Three very quick questions, Kieran, and you have, I think, covered two of them, but these are the three questions that I'm most asked when I meet other football fans about Sheffield Wednesday. So I think Sheffield Wednesday fans would like an underlining of the answers. First of all, whoever buys Sheffield Wednesday Football Club will be buying the team, the club, and the ground. They're both up for sale.
That's correct. The administrators sell the assets of Sheffield Wednesday Football Club and Sheffield 3 Limited. Now, Sheffield 3 Limited, was it Sheffield 2? One of the two, is a separate company which was set up about 6 years ago, where Dejon Shansiri transferred Hillsborough into the arms of another company. That generated a profit, and the aim was to use that profit to avoid a points deduction. However, he was so incompetent that he managed to sell the stadium to himself in the wrong year, and that actually resulted in a points deduction. But the good news is that Begbie's are selling both companies effectively as a job lot. So you will be acquiring the real estate as well.
Secondly, are HMRC one of the outstanding creditors? Do Sheffield Wednesday owe back tax, in other words?
Yes, HMRC, it works in two ways. First of all, they are they are a preferred creditor, and therefore, in theory, they're entitled to 100%. But I think they settled for 25% at Derby, because the alternative was the administrator said, if you want the full amount, we're not going to be able to sell the club, and you're going to get 100% of nothing going forwards.
Sure.
So yes, but it has to be stressed that the taxes which have been run up, VAT on merchandise sales, on ticket sales, PAYE, national insurance, which have been run up during the course of the administration, those taxes will be paid by Begbie's as part of the cost of the administration. Begbie's are a professional organisation. They will ensure 100% that will be the case. Failure to do so, A, could result in them losing their licence, and B, nobody would ever employ them again. So that's not an issue.
And thirdly, notwithstanding the fact that Chansiri may demand his pound of flesh, which could cause problems, are Sheffield Wednesday fans able to 100% reassure themselves he has nothing to do whatsoever with the future of Sheffield Wednesday Football Club? He's gone.
Well, I cannot see how any consortium would pass the EFL owners and directors test with Dejon Shansiri within its realms. And also, what does he bring to a consortium? Yeah, he brings a record of failure, of incompetence, and no money. It's not an attractive CV.
Yeah. And the emotional question to end with, Kieran, as we know, I know you blush and you go, "Ah, shucks," when I say you are the country's leading football finance expert. You're one of the world's leading football finance experts, Kieran. And one day I will put you and Swiss Ramble in a Wetherspoons car park, and we'll sort out who the actual leading football finance expert is.
I'll be there with my autograph book.
What though is your instinct as to how this will play out for Sheffield Wednesday Football Club and for their fans?
When the club went into administration, I said at the time, I'm 99.99% certain that there will be a successful outcome. What has happened with the withdrawal of the bid from the board consortium is a pain in the backside. It's frustration. Sheffield Wednesday fans have been through an awful lot. They deserve clarity. They deserve transparency. They deserve being able to go to bed at night and think, who are we playing on Saturday? Are we going to sign a player? And instead, they've been put through this emotional turmoil. I maintain that we are 99.99% certain of a successful outcome. Sheffield Wednesday are too big to fail. They are not. And people say, "Well, hold on. What happened at Lehman Brothers? What happened to Woolworths and so on?" Football is a different beast. Sheffield Wednesday offer a prospective owner so much. They've got history, heritage, culture, a committed fan base, a big fan base. They've got a place in the third tier of English football. They've got the capacity to return not just to the Championship, but to the Premier League as well. And that is an incredibly attractive package. So that's why I maintain that level of confidence.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, the size and passion of that fan base is an asset in itself, isn't it? You'd think for any potential buyers. We haven't really got the time, Kieran, and I don't think it's appropriate either to do our usual long-winded farewell, which normally turns into a debate about wacky races and carry-on films, if not Cure singles. So I think all we can do is, if there are Sheffield Wednesday fans listening for the first time, then you can hear us every Tuesday with our questions pod and every Thursday with our news pod. And I suspect that between now and the start of next season, your club will be mentioned on every single one of them. In the meantime, we wish all football fans a happy day, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
The price of football. The price of football.